Guys, with the 2024 tax extension deadline less than a month away, I think it's time for another financial assessment. So bust out those W-2s, because today we're going to be auditing Regular Show to try and figure out how much Mordecai, Rigby, and the other guys at the park make. Real quick, be sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Similar to my Smiling Friends audit, we've got to establish some facts about the park as a business. Of course, we all know Mordecai and Rigby work as groundskeepers at the park, but for redundancy's sake, let's outline the business as a whole, starting from the top down. The park is owned by this old moon-faced dude, Mr. Maylard, and he functions as the president of the company. Below him is his son Pops, who's a park manager, but in his older, more eccentric years, he's a manager in name only. Then we got Benson, the real manager of the park. He handles the oversight of the park's operation and is the guy getting yelled at by Maylard when shit hits the fan. Working below Benson are the groundskeepers, which consist of Skips, Muscle Man, High Five Ghost, Mordecai, and Rigby. They also bring on a college intern named Thomas in Season 4. Beyond that, there are still a few aspects of the park that need to be specified before anyone's income can be determined. First off, unlike the park in your town, the park in Regular Show is not owned or funded by the city or state's parks department, as both the house and the ever-changing acreage it sits on have been owned by Maylard for over 100 years. Even though it's privately owned, people can come and go as they please without having to pay an admission fee. Businesses like these are, funny enough, called POPs, or privately owned public spaces, with the revenue coming from goods being sold at the various snack bars or hosting events like birthday parties. The next crucial detail that needs to be determined is where exactly the park is located. In the finale, we see Mordecai's car has California license plates, and while some of you may consider this a stretch, considering in various episodes like Season 3, Episode 6, Busted Cart, we see the park is within a few hours' drive of desert landscapes, I feel confident saying the show takes place in California. But beyond that, there aren't a lot of details to figure out where in California. So I figured since the show takes several cues from the creator J.G. Quintel's life and experiences, we'll use his hometown of Hanford, located in Kings County, California, as the exact location of the park. Now, here's where things get a bit contentious, because we need to determine when exactly the show is taking place. With heavy influence from 80s culture and retro tech, it gives the show a sort of amalgam time period, seeing things like cell phones exist alongside dudes with mullets. Which isn't really saying much in 2024, but Regular Show was doing this before Theo Von made mullets cool again. Anyway, the point I'm getting at here, the show has sort of an out-of-time feeling, similar to Batman the Animated Series. During my initial investigation for this video, I saw a lot of people online who speculated the show took place during the late 90s, based on various factors. Upon rewatching the show for research, we actually get a solid confirmation of when the show doesn't take place, way back in the Season 1 episode, Prank Callers. In this episode, Mordecai and Rigby are sent back in time by the master prank caller. As they travel back to the 1980s, we see various years pass by, with the most recent year we can make out being 2004. There is another early 2000s year shown, but the final digit is obscured. At this point, my initial thought was that Season 1 of the show was taking place in the same year of its debut, 2010. The only issue being that earlier in the Prank Callers episode, Mordecai and Rigby are watching a prank call video that featured a flip phone. With the iPhone hitting the market in the summer of 2007, by the early 2010s, smartphones had received mass market adoption. So a flip phone feels out of place for that time period. So we know the show is taking place several years after 2004, and that 2010 is too late in the timeline because of that flip phone. We can only assume the show takes place in the year 2007, with the obstructed date from the time warp being 2005 or 6. So the gang works at a park in Hanford, California in the year 2007, which is more than enough for us to figure out these guys' salaries. Just a heads up, we'll be going after their pre-tax income because California taxes intimidate me. Besides, after rewatching the Season 1 episode Dawn,
Pops tried to pay the park's taxes with lollipops.
It doesn't really seem like the park has their ducks in a row when it comes to paying Uncle Sam. If you recall from my Smiling Friends assessment, the primary methodology in determining everyone's income was to look at everyone's housing situation and reverse calculate their income based on speculated rent prices. And if you know anything about Regular Show, you know that won't work here because everyone besides Benson lives at the park. So where does that leave us on determining everyone's income? There's only a couple times in the show where a dollar amount related to income ever gets tossed around. The most popular being in the season 6 episode, Brilliant Century Duck Crisis.
Well, does this play blow?
You think a month's pay is gonna change our minds?
Regardless of whether or not Mordecai was exaggerating or not, I've seen a few TikToks use this statement to infer Mordecai and Rigby make 55 cents an hour.
Mordecai and Rigby are terribly underpaid, meaning that Mordecai and Rigby make about 55 cents an hour.
And I just can't proceed with that number. Another time where Mordecai and Rigby's wage comes into play is in the season 1 episode, Caffeinated Concert Tickets, where the guys work overtime to get tickets to see Fist Pump. After all the standard admission tickets are sold out, probably because of scalpers, let's be real, the only option left is to buy the super deluxe tickets for $200 a pop. To earn this money, Mordecai and Rigby work overtime at the park by cleaning the gutters, sanitizing the bathrooms, doing the dishes, and mowing the lawn, all while a giant coffee bean sprays coffee in their mouths, firecracker style.
Coffee, coffee!
Unfortunately, without knowing the amount of hours worked, we can't determine their base hourly wage, so we're right back to square one. It was at this point that I began scrounging around on the internet for anything that could shed some light on the situation. And after about 42 minutes and 2 potential malware risks later, I found an occupational survey from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics dated May 9th, 2008. The survey provides the mean and median salaries for various occupations based on data collected in May 2007. If we flip through to page 15, we can find landscaping and groundskeeping workers listed at a mean income of $11.54 an hour or $22,980 a year. It also lists the median wage at $10.69, but since the mean and median values are so similar, we'll stick with the mean going forward. While I was initially hesitant to proceed with this value for a Californian wage, as the data the Bureau of Labor Statistics collected is influenced by wages in lower income states relative to the Golden State, Mordecai and Rigby aren't exactly stellar at their jobs, so I think it evens out. So let's throw the two on the board at $11.53 an hour or $23,980 annually before taxes. If we circle back to the question of how much overtime Mordecai and Rigby worked for the fist pump tickets, since we now have their base wage of $11.53, we can multiply that by the standard overtime pay rate of a time and a half, giving us their overtime wage of $17.30 an hour. Divide that by the $200 price tag of an individual deluxe ticket, that would mean they each worked 11 and a half hours of overtime, which is a plausible time frame to accomplish the 4 tasks they were assigned, and lends credibility to our estimated wage for the two. Next on the chopping block are Muscle Man and High Five Ghost, and with the info gathered on Mordecai and Rigbone, it makes these two chucklefucks' wages the easiest to figure out. Assuming the two have worked at the park longer than Mordecai and Rigby, and factoring in they're trusted to do more important tasks, like picking up the special entertainment.
How's it the jar? Oh, it's bright. You know who likes special entertainment like that? My mom! Can I borrow $5?
We'll throw them down for $13 an hour or $27,040 a year. Moving on to Skips, where we're taking a slightly different approach. With Skips being the most senior groundskeeper at the park, really the most senior employee outright, Skips started his employment at the park either in the year 1800 or 1873, depending on which episode you want to believe. Regardless, he's been at the park for over 100 years and has seen various ups and downs in the American economy. So I think it's important to highlight Skips' earnings throughout his lengthy tenure at the park. Going back to the 19th century, it was difficult to find applicable first-hand sources, but luckily I stumbled across this scan of the very first labor survey conducted by the California Bureau of Labor Statistics from way back in 1884. Now this document didn't factor in laborers that were black or Chinese, but since I'm pretty sure Skips is neither of those, I think we're good. While the occupation of groundskeeper is not listed, if we look on page 213, we can find data listed for gardeners. And as far as I'm concerned, tomato, tomato. Am I right? So according to the survey, the pay range for a Californian gardener in 1885 ranged from $35 to $50 a month. Let's take the average of $42 a month, or $510 annually as Skips' 19th century wage. Just for reference, the nominal average wage in 1885 was $581, so Skips wasn't doing too bad for himself at the time. Fast forward 5.5 decades to 1940, and Congress had just amended the Fair Labor Act, making the 40-hour work week the threshold for full-time employment the law of the land. While I couldn't find any contemporary documents saying a gardener in 1940s California makes X amount, I did find a document from the U.S. Department of Labor from 1944 that outlines the wages of various workers across major American cities. Flipping over to page 12, we can find the data for gardeners. Unfortunately, the survey doesn't list any Californian cities. However, we are provided with the wages for gardeners in Buffalo, New York at 78 cents an hour, Denver, Colorado at $2.72 an hour, Gary, Indiana at 84 cents an hour, and Hartford, Connecticut at 78 cents an hour. Let's say fuck it and take the average of $1.45 an hour or $3,016 annually and call it a day for the 1940s. And the last value we need to determine is how much Skips was making in the not-so-distant past of 2007. Compared to his past earnings, this will be a cakewalk to figure out. Considering he's the most senior groundskeeper at the park, I feel confident putting Skips' wage at $15 an hour, or $31,200 a year. While you could make the argument that Skips deserves a lot more money due to his tenure and experience, between the perks of housing and the privacy to do his immortality ritual, Skips is probably pretty okay with this wage. Plus, at this point in his immortal life, I'm sure Skips has learned money isn't everything. Next we got Pops. And Pops thinks lollipops are money.
Just let me get my billfold. Butterscotch ripple. Ta-ta!
So, moving on. With Benson being the only one who doesn't live at the park, I figured I could use the Smiling Friends approach and calculate his income based on his apartment. Benson is renting a one-bedroom apartment in Hanford, California in the year 2007. And based on data from the time provided by rentdata.org, a one-bedroom apartment in the Hanford-Corcoran metropolitan area was $545 a month. Assuming Benson is responsible and spends 1/3 of his monthly income on housing, that would mean he'd be earning $1,635 a month or $19,620 a year, which would mean he makes less than Mordecai and Rigby.
I have nothing!
So that's definitely not right. Since that approach was a dud, it was back to the internet to try and get a frame of reference for a park manager's salary. So after learning you can filter by year on Google search, I was able to find this special bulletin regarding a park manager from the city of San Diego. While the listing itself refers to a park ranger, the duties listed match many of the tasks we see Benson doing throughout the series. The job itself is listed at a pay range of $68,910 to $84,739 a year. I feel more comfortable erring on the low end of the scale for Benson. Even though the park has managed to stay in business for over 100 years, Mr. Maylard did threaten to close the park due to low revenue in the season 6 episode Men in Uniform.
I've decided to shut down the park.
Come on, you can't.
What?
No visitors? Well, what about, that guy?
Wait, not yet.
One ugly guy plotting revenge on my son for the last 4 years isn't enough to keep the park open.
On that note, it's important to point out the job in the listing is for a government job under the San Diego Department of Parks and Rec. Benson is a private employee of Mr. Maylard, and after looking into it, I found the pay discrepancy between private employees and their government counterparts is about 6.8% in favor of the private sector. After rounding that up to an even 7% for convenience sake, that puts Benson's pay rate at $35 an hour or $73,734 a year. Last but not least, we have Thomas the intern. And regardless of international espionage, he was hired as a college intern, so I'm assuming he was unpaid. In a way, I guess that does make him the least then. Before moving on, it's time for the Mr. Maylard bonus round. While we never get an exact number on the old moon pie's whelp, in the season 8 episode, The Ice Tape, we learn Maylard used to sell meteorites in his younger years. In modern times, meteorite fragments range in price from 50 cents a gram all the way to $40 a gram, with rarer stones fetching around $1,000 a gram. Judging by the meteorites we see Maylard and his team harvesting in Pops' origin tape, he must have made a fortune doing this. In the tape, we don't get a good look at the haul, so it's unknown the exact quantity of meteorites recovered, but we can see 8 meteorites visible within the frame. In 2023, a meteorite of similar size to Maylor's was found in Antarctica, and that subject weighed about 17 pounds. If we apply that to Maylor's haul, that would mean he recovered at least 136 pounds of meteorites, giving that haul a value of $30,804 to $2,464,320 in 2024. In real life, the first expedition to Antarctica with video equipment was led by Sir Ernest Shackleton and occurred in 1914. According to the Regular Show Wiki, Pops was born between 1879 and 1910. So if we assume this expedition took place at the latest possible date of 1910, that would mean at the time of recovery, this haul had a value ranging from $930 to $74,369. While it remains unknown the exact weight of this haul or the number of expeditions Maylord embarked on, it's safe to say this venture earned him incredible wealth. To circle back to that TikTok I mentioned earlier, one of the theories on why Mordecai and Rigby's take-home pay was so low, on top of their housing being provided, was that Mordecai and Rigby have damaged or flat out destroyed the park countless times over, and must be repaying Maylord for those damages. When researching this video, my initial strategy to determine their wage was to tally up all the damage they caused in Season 1 and use that to work my way back to that $100 a month figure. By the time I got to Episode 4, shit was already way out of hand. Anyway, for Mordecai and Rigby to each earn $100 a month, with a pay rate of $11.53 an hour, they would each owe the park $1,745 a month, totaling $20,940 a year, which comes out to about 87% of the $23,980 they earn annually. Now, as to what the ratio of housing costs to debt repayment is, it's up in the air. Regardless, situation's pretty fucked. So to sum things up, Mordecai and Rigby make $23,980 a year, Muscleman and High Five Ghosts make $27,040 a year, Skips makes $31,200 a year, Pops' dad is rich so it doesn't matter, and Benson makes $73,734 annually. But that was way back in 2007. What are those numbers looking like today with all the inflation that's occurred since then? While pretty much no one's wage keeps pace with the growing cost of living or inflation, that doesn't mean we can't do a little plug and play with an inflation calculator. So in 2024, Mordecai and Rigby would make $36,378, Muscleman and High Five Ghosts would make $41,053, Skips would make $47,369, rest in peace Pops, and Benson will earn $111,855,000 annually. In 2022, the median income for Kings County, California was $32,984, and if we wind those numbers back a few years, that still leaves everyone above that threshold. So good for them. Anyway, that wraps it up with this financial assessment. Let me know y'all's thoughts on this or any other content you'd like to see in the comments down below. See you on the next Randograph.